Welcome to this month's edition of Midlife and Thriving, where we're guiding midlife women back to the most important relationship of their lives with themselves through the art of self-care, ensuring that through their thriving, they are enabled to take their brilliance out into the world with energy, confidence, and joy, role modeling for generations to come. And I am blessed and honoured to have a wonderful guest with me this month. It's Dr. Emily Anhalt. Dr. Emily, welcome to this show. Welcome to
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you here today. So just before we dive into the discussion around emotional fitness, I just want to say Dr. Emily Anhalt is a psychologist, author, and co-founder of COA, which is the Gym for Mental Health. She has, for the past 15 years, worked clinically with executives, founders, and tech employees, and has conducted extensive research with prominent psychologists and entrepreneurs. You can read a little bit more about her bio underneath the video, but I just kind of wanted to set the stage of who we have with us today. And so I really want to just dive into this topic of emotional fitness, and in particular, kind of defining what it is. So how do you conceptualize emotional fitness, and why is it particularly important during midlife?
Sure thing. So I define emotional fitness as an ongoing proactive practice of working on your mental health. You can think about it a little like physical fitness. So a lot of people think that if they're not sick, that means that they're healthy. But if you talk to someone who's physically fit, someone who eats well, sleeps enough, exercises, they'll tell you just because you're not ill does not necessarily mean that you're fit. And the same is true with our mental health. There is this idea that people are either mentally healthy or mentally ill. And the truth is most of us exist somewhere in between. So the idea of emotional fitness is that there is always more work we could be doing to support ourselves, to level up the relationship that we have with our own self and with other people. And emotional fitness is essentially a way to do that. It's like, what are your emotional push-ups and how do you do them?
Fantastic. I love that. I love that. And that's such a true, coming from a physical fitness background, of spending many years in that space, understanding that just because somebody works out 3 times a week or eats these really great meals does not mean to say that they're in in their optimal state, and that there's always something else that we can be doing to really kind of add another layer to that.
Absolutely. And I think it's especially important and also especially beautiful in midlife because as we enter or exist in our midlife phase, we have a better idea of who we are. We've had a chance to test out some of the stories we have about ourselves. And I've noticed that in this phase of life, self-awareness tends to increase, and the ability to look into our blind spots can often become a little more doable. And I think, I'll go through each of the traits, but I'd be really interested to hear how they land for you and your audience, which one feels like the easiest at this time and which one feels like the biggest area of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that, so you mentioned the 7 traits there, so that's a perfect time for me to pick up on that, because in your book, Flex Your Feelings, Train Your Brain to Develop the 7 Traits of Emotional Fitness, you talk about these 7 traits. So I feel like this is the perfect time for me to ask you, can you just give us an overview of what those 7 traits are?
Sure, and I'll tell you how I came across them. So I'm a clinical psychologist, and a number of years ago, I wanted to figure out what a more proactive approach to mental health would actually look like. So I did a big research study, something called an interpretive phenomenological analysis, which is a fancy way of saying that I interviewed 100 psychologists and entrepreneurs about what makes someone emotionally healthy. I essentially said, how would you know if you were sitting across the table from an emotionally healthy person? What do they do? What do they not do? How does that feel? And out of this research came these 7 traits of emotional fitness, the 7 things that emotionally healthy people are working on and prioritizing all the time. And those 7 things are mindfulness, curiosity, self-awareness, resilience, empathy, communication, and playfulness. And so in this book, I have a chapter devoted to each trait where I share a clinical example of me helping someone work on this trait in their life. And then I share really actionable, practical tools that people can use to strengthen this trait in your life.
Fantastic. Actually, one of those, what immediately jumped out as you named those traits for me personally was the playfulness bit, because I always feel that that's so missing, like in midlife.
Yes.
That seriousness that we take on, and we forget about the importance of playfulness and how that can really impact our relationships, our performance, our health.
Absolutely. I'd say playfulness was maybe the biggest surprise to me out of this research. But then once I saw it, it felt so clear and obvious. Playfulness is so important. There are all kinds of studies that actually show that how playful you are directly correlates to the longevity of your life. I read a study that showed that people who play regularly live longer by a statistically significant number of years than people who don't play regularly. That's how important it is. And when it comes to the relationship we have with ourselves and other people, play is one of the most profound ways to deepen that connection.
Yes, I agree. And that is like music to my ears, because I'm a great one for play. I think play is essential, and that we have become quite disconnected from it. So actually, I love that what you've highlighted and what you're highlighting in your book really kind of brings us back to that, because it's such a key thing for us to do, and it's fun, right? Being playful, fantastic. So, what are some of the practical strategies? You've already said that you know what you offer is those kind of really practical things that people can do. What are some of those practical strategies for incorporating emotional fitness?
Right. So for each trait, I share what I call emotional push-ups. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you think about what a physical push-up is, it's this small physical exertion. And if you were only to do one push-up one time, you're probably never going to get any stronger. But when you do push-ups every day, not only will you get better at doing push-ups, but you will gain strength that allows you to do other things in your life more easily, like carry groceries or lift up your child or grandchild, that kind of thing. So emotional push-ups are the emotional equivalent. It's anything that puts you just a little outside of your emotional comfort zone so that you can grow. And if you do them in an ongoing and regular way, you will become more mentally strong, such that not only will you be able to do more emotional push-ups, but you will have more mental strength in other parts of your life. You will just see your relationships improve. You will see the way that you react to things, feel more healthy, that kind of thing. So anything that puts you a little outside of your comfort zone is an emotional push-up, which means what's an emotional push-up for me might be different than what's an emotional push-up for you. So in the book, I encourage people to think, what is one thing I could do in this area that would make me just a little uncomfortable so that I can get stronger? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you are a person who feels really uncomfortable when people give you compliments. That's a really common one. Some of us, anytime someone gives us a compliment, we're like, thank you, but I don't really know what to do with that. So an emotional push-up might be to reach out to someone in your life and to say, hey, I would love for you to tell me one thing that I'm doing well as a friend or a colleague or a sister, whatever it might be. And then pay attention to how it feels when they give you that compliment, and sit in the discomfort of it and let yourself actually take it in. And just by doing that, you've gotten just a little bit mentally stronger, because it's important that we take in the positive feedback that people give us. So that's just one example, but other examples of emotional push-ups could be anything from not looking at your phone before you go to bed. It could be apologizing for a mistake. It could be saying no when you don't have time for something, or it could be not having a drink and instead just sitting with whatever you're feeling that evening. Anything that's just a little bit uncomfortable that will ultimately make you mentally stronger. Those are the exercises that I'm encouraging people to do.
Great. And that so aligns with the messages that I often put out, that it's the micro things that you do that truly matter, because they help you to be consistent. If they're micro, then they don't freeze you, right?
Yes.
So you can be much more consistent and make them happen. So yeah, I'm loving what I'm hearing, Dr. Emily. That it's just music to my ears. I truly love that. Now, many individuals face kind of resistance when addressing emotional health. What advice do you give to them to overcoming those barriers?
The first step, I believe, there is to have some self-compassion. We are resistant to things for important reasons. If something doesn't feel good to us, then we're probably trying to protect ourselves from something important. And so I think rather than just, I think sometimes people can be really hard on themselves when they're not able to do a hard thing. And in my mind, the first step is to have self-compassion, to say, this is tough for me. There's something about this that doesn't feel good. I can have kindness and compassion toward myself for that. Sometimes I'll recommend, imagine you as a 5-year-old sitting next to you, struggling with something. How would you talk to that person about their struggles? You probably wouldn't say, oh, look at you again. You're never able to do these hard things. You probably say, yeah, this is hard. It makes sense that you're struggling with this. How can we work together? How can I support you? And if we could talk to ourselves that way, it's much easier to love yourself to a better version of who you are. It will never work to hate yourself into a better version of who you are. So I think that is the first step. And then the second step is just prove to yourself that you are more capable of tolerating this discomfort than you think. And that's why I love your message of these micro steps. You don't have to throw yourself off the cliff of discomfort. You can just pick one small step, one small thing to do every day to challenge yourself. And what we sometimes forget in adulthood is that when you practice something, you will get better at it. And that includes being more mentally and emotionally healthy. If you are intentional and decide to work at it, you will get stronger and it will get easier.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And of course, like when we talk about emotional fitness, emotional well-being, that really does, for me, when I think about it, I think it kind of connects with relationships and how we approach relationships and how we are in relationships. So, how does enhancing emotional fitness really influence our personal and professional relationships?
I love that you brought that up, and I love how focused you are on the relationship we each have to ourselves. Because, something that I learned early on when I was studying psychology is that the world is spoken in the language of relationships. So the more fluent you are in that language, the better you're going to do across the board. Business is just a series of relationships. We are communal creatures. We need each other. And of course, like you said, the relationship we each have to ourselves is the place to start. Everything ripples out from that in all kinds of ways. So in my mind, ultimately, emotional fitness is really just a way to strengthen the relationship you have to yourself and other people. That's what it all boils down to. As you become more communicative, as you become more playful, as you become more empathetic, as you become more self-aware, your relationship with yourself and other people is just naturally going to improve, which means your life is going to improve. Because the stronger and more meaningful and more joyful your relationships, the better your entire life will be.
Oh, yes. I am certain that as people are listening to this, this is resonating. It's like, oh, yeah, this is the concrete part of understanding that when we build the relationship with self, we're not doing it purely just for ourselves. There's this bigger thing, that ripple effect, when we kind of have all of that love and compassion and kindness and all of that stuff for ourselves. This is what we ripple out into the world. And that for me is why I am, I'm self-care crazy, and it's not for the self-indulgent part of self. It's about understanding how that impacts our lives in the world around us. And I'm sure
beautifully said.
All of us want more of that.
I'm curious too, when you think of the 7 traits, and I'll go over them again, they are mindfulness, and I'll define each one. Mindfulness is becoming a little more comfortable being uncomfortable. Curiosity is continued learning, pursuing growth over defensiveness. Self-awareness is understanding your emotional strengths and struggles and triggers and biases. Resilience is bouncing forward through setbacks and failures. Empathy is understanding the emotions of others. Communication is putting words to your needs and expectations and boundaries. And playfulness is being a yes and person and fostering space to deepen connection. So when you think of those 7 things, I'm curious, what jumps out for you as your big strength, and which one would you say is your biggest area of growth?
I would say my biggest strength is probably curiosity. Because for me, like once I kind of really got my head around the importance of curiosity, I just put it into everything. And what that has meant is that in those times before, when I would have perhaps been quite hard on myself or doubted things, I just get curious about things.
Yes.
Oh, I wonder what made me say that? What made that come up for me? And that curiosity is about that growth that you can suddenly have.
What a superpower. I
Yeah,
feel it even just in the questions that you've come up with for this conversation. It's clear that you're just a thoughtful, curious
it's
person.
just and it is a really powerful tool to have in terms of growth. Whilst I love it and I know that I still feel like playfulness is something I want to have more of.
Oh, we all
um
could.
yeah, and it's not because I don't have it. I mean, I've got grandchildren and things, so playfulness for me, is something I get to do with them. But actually, I feel sometimes it's more about making sure that I'm just doing it for myself. What are those
Yeah.
little moments of playfulness I'm having throughout my day to ensure that, because I know how different that feels in my body, like the physiology of that.
Right.
So for me, as much as I do have it, I definitely want more.
That's great. I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Okay, so let's just say that people are like, okay, emotional fitness, I see that it's important. What are those indicators that individuals can look for to assess their development
Yeah.
in emotional fitness?
So I actually include, pardon me, I actually include a little self-assessment quiz in the book in the beginning and in the end, so you can see if anything has shifted.
Nice.
And in general, I think what you're talking about in a way is self-awareness. How can we know? How are we doing with emotional fitness and how could we be better? That's why that's one of the traits. And when I talk about self-awareness, I talk about 3 things that you might consider folding into your life to increase your self-awareness. One of them is therapy. I think a lot of people believe that therapy is only for those who are really struggling, but therapy is really for anyone who wants to better understand who they are and who wants to shift that relationship that they have to themselves and other people. The second suggestion I have is starting a journaling practice. Even if you're just writing down one line every day about how you felt that day, over time you will start to see patterns, and the thoughts we have in our mind tend to feel different than they do once we're writing them down and looking at them in front of us. So that's a very powerful practice. And then finally, asking for feedback in a really ongoing way. I make a practice every week, every month of reaching out to someone in my life and saying, what's one thing I could do 10% better? And what's one thing that I'm doing well? Because we can only see ourselves so clearly. We need to have ourselves reflected back. So asking
Yes.
for feedback is a nice way to increase that awareness. And
Yes.
then perhaps an interesting thing about emotional fitness is it's a little bit less quantitative, a little bit less measurable than physical fitness is. But what I have found is that if you stick with it, if you make it a part of your day, you will just look around one day and think, wow, everything in my life is better. My relationships are healthier. I feel like I'm living more authentically. It just feels better to be in my life. And that's the
Yeah.
beauty of the practice.
Yeah, that's almost like what you want, is that to some degree it almost feels effortless because you're doing these micro things, you're making, so you're not necessarily seeing all of those things happening and unfolding.
Right.
But then suddenly it's like, whoa, hold on a minute. Like a year ago, I would have reacted so differently in that
Yes.
situation.
Yes, that's perfectly said.
Wow, amazing. And I love, journaling, I think is just always such a beautiful practice. And like you said, it's a great way of writing out what's coming up, which for me also releases some inside space. It's like, get it
Yes.
up and out. So even if you're not talking about it, you're writing it, you're putting it somewhere. And also you mentioned therapy, and it's really interesting because in the US, and this is perhaps my perception, it seems much more acceptable and the thing that you do. In the UK and in other parts of the world, it still is a little bit like, oh, but you would only go and see a therapist if, blah,
Right.
blah, 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 blah. Whereas actually having that ability to be with somebody and speak things out is the very thing that we do when we have mentors and coaches and all of those other things.
That's what I believe. I mean, no world-class athlete will ever reach their full potential without a coach. I don't know why we expect ourselves to reach our full potential without some emotional support. So that is a stigma that I'm hoping to change, that therapy can be for anyone who just wants to work
Yes.
on themselves. To me, it's such a sign of strength and thoughtfulness, that you believe it's worth doing your own work in order to benefit yourself and everyone around you.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, there's that ripple effect. It's you start with you, but it's also that impact that it has as it ripples out to other people. Wonderful.
Yes.
Which brings me nicely on to the next question, which is all about community. So, how can engaging with a supportive community aid building and maintaining emotional fitness? Obviously, you have a community. What are the wins of being with other people?
Well, I think I'd ask you to think about physical fitness and how it feels to be on a solo physical fitness journey versus part of a community. When you go to a gym, let's say, to do a workout, no one can lift your weights for you. You have to do that work by yourself. But it's much easier to do that work when there are people all around you who are also lifting weights, who are cheering you on and who are showing you how far you've come, or who are role models about where you want to go. And so there's something very powerful about not feeling like you're in a pursuit alone. So something that we say at COA is emotional fitness is an individual journey, but a communal pursuit. So as you gather other people around you who are also committed to emotional fitness, you'll find that it's more fun and much easier to have it be part of your everyday life.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that there's something beautiful about when you're in a community, champion each other, because everybody has like difficult days, difficult moments, all that stuff. And actually, when you have those people around you who are like, we're here for you, we've got you back, it's okay. What a difference that makes than trying to do it all on your own, which I feel that we spend way too much trying to do on our own, and it can be incredibly painful and debilitating. So yeah, I'm completely with you with the community.
It really does make all the difference. And in the book, toward the end, I talk about how do you build community around emotional fitness, because it's not that easy to do sometimes. Making friends as an adult is complicated, and sometimes the friends we've carried with us through life are not aligned with some of the importance of these practices. So I think that we can always benefit from adding new people to our life who have the same goals that we do.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Okay, so for someone new kind of to this concept, what initial steps would you recommend to begin their emotional fitness journey?
I think so. The first trait of emotional fitness is mindfulness. And I define mindfulness as becoming more comfortable being uncomfortable. And the reason why this trait is first is that this practice is a little uncomfortable. If you were trying to get more physically strong and you were never willing to be a little uncomfortable, you probably wouldn't get very far. If you're only ever walking a comfortable pace, then your heart rate's not getting up. You're not strengthening yourself. So I would say the first thing someone might do is to write down, what are the things in life that make me a little more uncomfortable than they seem to make other people? Where are my areas of discomfort? Is it saying no and upholding boundaries? Is it being extroverted with other people? Is it standing up for myself? Is it public speaking? Like, what are the areas of your life that are a little uncomfortable? And then you might think, what are some small ways I can lean toward that discomfort instead of away from it? How can I prove to myself that I'm stronger than I think? I think that's a great first step, because the better you are at being uncomfortable, the better you'll be at strengthening all of the other traits.
Yeah. Again, it's like music to my ears, and it's like you've been living inside my head for some period of time. It's one of those things that I've said so often: get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because guess what? Life is quite often uncomfortable, right? And we need to be able to say, well, yeah, it's uncomfortable. That's not going to stop me from moving into the spaces and places that we want to go, right? And I think that that's such a powerful message. And actually, yes, that first step is like, and knowing that it's okay because you're not the only one.
Yes.
Other people are having to do it too.
100%.
Yeah. Wonderful. Oh my goodness. So just to wrap it up, if you could leave those who are watching the video, who have read the newsletter content, because it's all around emotional fitness, what is one thought, tip, whatever that you would like to give them?
I often find that people in midlife have learned to be really caring toward people around them. they've become parents and grandparents. They have friends of many years. They're often very nurturing and empathetic. And so the thing I would want to leave your community with is that you each are worthy of your own attention and care and resources. And you are actually taking care of every relationship in your life. You are doing the people in your life a huge service by turning that kindness and compassion and resources and energy on yourself, that you will see that ripple effect and that you deserve that, and that there's something so loving toward the world about being loving toward yourself.
Yeah. Oh, beautifully summarized. And again, just that for me is just so aligned with what I say, what I think, what I feel, what I believe. So huge thank you, Dr. Emily, for joining this month. And again, for those, please, the book will be, is it May that it's available from?
May 13th it comes out, and there is a UK version of the book that will be available as well, so it will be available there. And brilliant. I can't wait to hear what everyone thinks. I'm on social media. My handle is at Dr Emily Anhalt on all the platforms, and I hope that all of the content resonates.
Fantastic. So that's Flex Your Feelings, Train Your Brain to Develop the 7 Traits of Emotional Fitness.
Yes.
And you've just had some snippets, some golden nuggets though today, right? You've had some golden nuggets. So I want to encourage you to go get the book, because the reality is, if it's going to enhance your life, it's going to make life be more joyful and fulfilling for you. It's also going to be more joyful and fulfilling for the people around you.
Yes.
And that is the absolute big win. So Dr. Emily, thank you so much for joining me today. It's just been a joy and an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. You are such a gem, and I'm so grateful that you are giving your community this kind of support. So it's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to being in touch.
Fantastic. Thank you.